Visionary. By Douglas Milewski. Elemental P. United States. Copyright 2016 by Douglas Milewski. All rights reserved. Chapter 23. 1 week later, Philadelphia was still a mess. There's no difference between a building and a fortification when an army decides to dig in. A few days became a few weeks, which became a few months, which became 7 months. For us, the siege had only just begun. We got news. Somebody in the city had a transmitter somewhere and talked to us about conditions in there. That's what we listened to until MacArthur bombed the power plants. The FSS Pennsylvania didn't survive the first week. Dive bombers blew the thing to the bottom. I'm not sure that anyone expected that to happen so easily or so quickly. Battleships weren't supposed to go down with one hit, but from above they didn't have much armor. Every additional bomb dropped only made it worse. Of the 1,358 crew members on board, 348 survived. My censorship job got yanked when the Army realized who was approving all the rogue stories. To my delight, they put a captain in charge of censorship, relieving me of the job. From now on, the military would say what information was fit for print. In fact, the Army got a whole lot of say. They wanted a rosier victory than the one that we had earned. They wanted propaganda in their own favor. I recognized the smell. Same flower, different gardener. I said as much to the Baroness. I am working on this, was her reply. She looked so very tired. When the governor doesn't have a say, you have to worry a little, and I did worry. There were too many ugly things going on, too many for a woman like the Baroness. Unlike the general clemency in Maryland, the fates of the communists in other places were less kind. In Raleigh, a crowd rushed the headquarters as the army stood back. Every communist there was hanged. In other places, the army lost their prisoners. How do you lose several hundred prisoners? We eventually found them buried among the pines. As I warned you, people are ugly. When I found myself without an official job, the Baroness hired me to write her speeches. I'm afraid that I was a rather boring speechwriter who didn't use nearly enough big words, but I did a serviceable job ensuring that the common man could follow the Baroness's logic. They deserved that. When the Baroness finally moved to Annapolis, I stayed behind in Baltimore. I and my Army VIP transit pass took the B&A down a few times a week to deliver what I wrote. If the Baroness needed anything sooner, I called, dictating the whole thing to Cymbeline. They always sounded better when the Baroness read them, always including witticisms that caught the ear. If there was any flair to those speeches at all, it was Joe who put it in. Who else could it be? Those were good days with fate. I won't call them easy days because they weren't. The woman was damnable on multiple levels. We were two damned private people learning to pry at each other's doors, continuously getting our fingers slammed. In truth, I was as damnable as she was. Yet she didn't run and neither did I. We stayed. I even unpacked my bags. As speechwriting didn't take up all my time, I began instructing Fate on the basics of thaumaturgy. She knew all the elements necessary for the study, so I pushed her hard. I needed her to be able to stand for the oral exams necessary to enter the tacitum. If she failed, then my instruction would be a sham, and she understood this far better than I. She innately understood that her performance stood for that of all women, and that if she missed her chance, it might be another generation before women could try this again. Even with such a good student, I didn't feel right instructing her on my own. Once a week we hopped into Fate's car, grabbing Edna Clark while we were at it, and with my travel pass we went north to visit Luke Mather near Carlisle. Luke was still at that old iron forge, rocking in his chair, Bible on his lap like a shotgun. For him they were about the same thing. He hobbled up on seeing us, standing upright with a cane. Well, 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 Luke said on seeing the girls emerge. He grasped each by the hands, kissing their cheeks. Edna Clark and Sophia Eisenberg. Oh, to see your faces. You both look well. He hobbled off a bit. Come on. I've a table under the tree. Catch up. Don't mind me. I twisted my leg fishing. Looking to the house, he shouted, Woman! We have guests. Bring beer. The outside furniture showed its age when we sat. Luke had repainted the wicker yellow, but that had done nothing for the aged material. The reeds creaked as we settled in. Where's that damned beer? His old Indian woman brought out a pitcher of water, shards of broken ice floating inside. Hold your damned horses, she snapped at him. To us she smiled, her grin pushing around her chubby face. It's good to have you. Are you hungry? We were, so she went in to make tuna salad. 2 women now, said Luke. What do you do with them all? I'm going to teach these 2 with your approval. You don't need my approval. The Lord giveth to each according to his need. He is my shepherd, and giveth me green pastures to lie in. Fate glared at Luke, but in her playful way. You had to know that expression to recognize it. I hope that you don't mean to say that he's lying in my pastures. And if he is, he better not be lying in Edna's. Luke gaped for a second, then let loose a laugh that shook the birds. No, my dear, no. I just didn't expect it to come out like that. That's one of the verses that you can say whenever you can't say anything else, except now. I interrupted their merriment. Do you mean that? I mean about your approval? Why shouldn't I approve? Edna here has always been sharp. When I used to come by and you weren't there, she'd grill me in the kitchen until you showed up. By God, she grilled me. What I wouldn't have given for a class full of students like her. And Sophia, she audited every class on magic despite studying ancient literature. I think that she did the work of 2 degrees at the same time. 2.5, said Fate. My Greek was weak. As I said, they were both inquisitive students and will make excellent wizards. Anyhow, even if I said no, which of you would listen to me? Anyone? When nobody responded, he raised his glass. Those were welcome words. I had nervously expected support, but now that we were getting at full steam, the support seemed miraculous. Will you come back to the city with me? The governor has suspended the anti-wizard laws. We're setting up a state program in Maryland. Luke sighed. I don't know if I can. That sort of life never agreed with me. I like it out here. Here is a good place. I needed to warn him. You're good as long as the church keeps you here. In case you didn't hear, Mel got killed in a shootout. Friendly fire. Luke looked dejected at that, shaking his head. They hadn't told me. He was a good man. I can get the religious laws suspended as well. I can hire you on. Luke looked over to his little house. I don't know. All settled down? Green pastures, he replied. The girls laughed. I had more to ask. I also need you for a little experiment. I want to recreate that day in my childhood in the church and see what comes of it. That caught Luke's attention. Are you thinking that will change you? I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know if it will settle me down or rile me up, but I do know that there's something there, some last piece that I don't know about. I haven't found anyone who can give me a first-hand account of the incident. If anybody wrote anything down, it's gone. I understand. How do you tell a kid that stuff, right? From what I understand, you were a bit of an idiot before that day. Supposedly, you were a perfectly intelligent kid, but you never said a word. And when you were left alone, your eyes drifted, darting about as if seeing things. What was that about? I don't know. But that day in the church, without warning, you uttered the divine words Fiat Lux, creating a light so bright that the congregation fled in fear. Somebody knocked over the statue of the Virgin Mary. That injured your brother. Her hands went straight through him. Bloody broken fingers. I remembered those bloody broken fingers. Luke tapped his Bible. You aren't the first to think of recreating that day, but if you aren't in control of yourself, then you'll be a menace. I told them as much, so they decided to train you in case you should get over that trauma, and otherwise wait until you were of a mature enough age to risk it. 10 years ago, you were close. I had been arguing with Clark about it, but he wouldn't budge. I thought him a damned fool, but now I think that his prudence was wise. If you didn't come to this damnable task on your own, then who were we to force you? Perhaps it really was God's will. Perhaps he had a bigger plan. So Clark wasn't holding me back? Of course he was holding you back, just in every way except this. This time you held yourself back. I didn't like hearing that because the words were true. Damn Luke Mather. Cymbeline arranged the church, the one where it had all happened the first time. Somebody had to get it arranged. It wasn't like churches let you just walk in and start playing their organs. I figured that there must be some sort of organist club card that got you extra benefits. At the door, the pastor greeted us gently, smiling ever so pleasantly and harmlessly in the way pastors do, leaving us to that holy space. I did not recognize the man. The previous pastor had passed away during the flu epidemic. My first impression of my old church was that it wasn't very big. I had always remembered it as larger and more impressive. The windows had been white when I was a child, but now most had been replaced by proper stained glass. The candles still stood under the statues, flicking in their many colors. The Virgin Mary still had her broken fingers. You could see inside the ceramic where iron rods formed the armature. Such a slender little woman seemed odd. Shouldn't she look more like a mother? The organ sat above and behind the congregation, nestled in the balcony. While not as big as many organs I've seen, this one had grand acoustics for its size. As Cymbeline warmed up, I walked about, doing my best to stay calm. The organ pressed the nerves behind my eyes. In that competition of fight or flight, my sense of fight nearly surrendered, but the walking helped. Searching for the sweetest place, I found it in the 10th row back, 4 places in, right near the Virgin Mary, in the exact spot where I had sat on that day. More memories welled up from that distant past. My family didn't normally sit there. We always sat 3 rows up, but some visiting family was in our spot that week, so we sat here instead. Chance had brought me here that day. When I slouched down a bit, closer to my boyhood height, the sounds became perfect, or at least as close to perfection as my meager ears could identify. "When you're ready," I shouted up. We had brought a few extra people along. Joe had insisted on driving, bringing Charlie with him. Cymbeline had sat in the front seat between those two. I had sat in back, between Comrade Fade and Edna. Somehow they had all kept their peace. Luke had sat all the way in the back with his woman, Gwen Doe. From the balcony above, Cymbeline spoke down, her voice carrying effortlessly. "This is perfect. I've never found an organ that I liked so much. No wonder you reacted to it." Another memory came to mind. The church had just bought the organ. That was the first day, the first Sunday, when the organ was first played. With the opening notes of Ave Maria, a knife moved across my soul, peeling off a layer like the skin of a grapefruit, opening me. The music poured in, cascading through parts of me that I had no suspicion even existed. I felt pressure against senses that should not be there. Is this what my teachers had tried to tell me the whole time? Was this what it felt like to feel the dicta flowing through you? Far more made sense now than ever did before. All that, and the tune had only just begun. Images struck me, my eyes, my senses. Some faraway place flashed in my eyes, where a pair of women naked stood in the door to a bathhouse. In another place, cliffs red as flame, and below them men digging out bones. Closer to home, a soldier firing a mortar, no closer to coming home than when he started. The images settled down, bringing sounds to me, like an orchestra out of tune. All sounds, a composition of chaos assaulting my senses. Then bitterness, sweet and salt, before the yeasty odor of rising bread wafted through. I felt the heat from the rising dough. That ball was alive. I screamed out. My back spasmed. Boy echoed through my ears. A whip struck again, no less gentle. I screamed again, but the pain was worse this time. I felt lonely. I felt alone. I felt forsaken. I understood why our Lord cried out upon the cross, then fell silent. There were words now in the music, words that I hadn't heard before, hadn't recognized. They were the secret words of thaumaturgy expressed as sequential notes, as close to the primal words as anything we could utter, and as imperfect. And under them and between them the words for light, over and over again, assaulted my brain. I found myself singing them, not using the Latin superimposed on top. Let there be. Let there be light. I suppose that was where my childhood self was interrupted, where the organist stopped playing, where the people panicked, but Cymbeline knew better than to stop. She kept playing despite the incandescent wonder blazing forth in the nave, iridescent white. And me, I kept saying words, recognizing them, knowing their meaning, yet having no idea where the words were taking me. The words of creation were poetry. Another vision. A single white line hurled down from the sky. It broke apart into 10 lines, then detonated 10 times like creation itself. Primal fire. Fire that should never be. A fire that did not yet exist. A pillar of fire. A plague of flame. The angel of death herself come to spare no one, not even those who splashed the blood of the Lamb upon their lintels. I witnessed our once and future extinction. The air burned. So I looked upon the world below me, which didn't look at all like the world did in books. There were clouds both wispy and puffy. The horizon curved. Above the stars wheeled silently and cold. How much more beautiful could it be? Sound moved across my ears like turning the dial up and down a radio, giving me more bits than pieces. There were no borders here. Below me sat bounty. Below me sat the Holy Grail, the earth itself, cornucopia. Ave Maria, mother to us all. Space had no air, so I forced myself to breathe. I felt the cool inner my lungs, my burning lungs. In and out my breath moved, breathing in and out the stuff of life. These were not my physical lungs, but my metaphysical lungs. I breathed in dicta, then I breathed out dicta. Different dicta. Change dicta. There wasn't supposed to be more than one kind of dicta, but there was. Proving that would keep me busy. The music faded. The vision faded. The light faded. The church fell silent. Then I breathed out both my physical lungs and my metaphysical lungs. Luke sat in front of me now. There are different kinds of dicta. I've suspected as much. How does that even work? He shrugged. I don't know. That's for you to work out. Besides that, how did it work out? More than I could ask for. It's like not an eye, not a third eye. Nothing like that. It was like a new breath. The breath of God. That comforted me. Yes, the breath of God. The breath of God leads to the words of God, and the word of God leads to creation and destruction. Say the words and they shall be so, whether that matches what you want or not. The words do not care if you are right or wrong or sloppy. I breathed in again with those inner lungs, and visions again swam across my eyes. I briefly smelled the sea. I let my breath out again. I see things. Maybe now, maybe the past, maybe the future. I don't know. Luke nodded. There's no mercy in that. We feared that in you, and to be honest, I'm glad that you took so long in finding your voice. This sort of gift would have destroyed you as a child. Men would have been tempted to use you for their worldly ambitions, putting all their sacrifices onto you. Even now you are not beyond that. Better that you keep that part hidden. This is no time for prophets. So I should remain silent and secret? Like Nostradamus, yes. Just be a wizard. Feel the breath. Instruct your students. Care for God's creation and all the creatures in it, including our neighbors. Make some babies. I like babies. Luke stood, patting my arm. Time for you to talk to everyone else. This didn't seem like the place for that. I wanted to go outside. I wanted to go into the light. I wanted to go where I could feel the breeze against my skin and feel called to nothing in particular. Fate and Cymbeline waited for me. I put one arm around each, walking out slowly. For this moment they were at peace. I would accept each little gift like that. Did it work? Asked Cymbeline. It worked, but differently than I expected. It feels like breathing. I could hear you singing from up there. The notes that I heard from you were inexplicable, as if there were harmonies buried inside of other harmonies. I can't explain it. Should I teach you as well? No. That life's not for me, Jack. I've always known that. Sorry. Fate nodded guardedly. Cymbeline kissed me on the cheek, then let go, leaving me on the steps with Fate. Fate looked at me hard, waiting for Cymbeline to get out of earshot. You're keeping a secret. I can feel that in you. It's all over you. Something to do with sight. Are you a visionary? How was I ever going to keep secrets from this woman? How did anyone keep secrets from her? I shouldn't have even tried. It was here that the really important thing happened, not back in the church. It was here that I saw all the pillars of my life, and how they were all based on lies to such a degree that I couldn't see the lies anymore. And now, with the prospect of visions, I was going to add a new lie. I depended on lies. Lies kept others away from me. Lies provided me freedom. Lies aided in estranging me, preventing emotional ties like a shield upon my arm. I was born of lies, taught by lies, marched by lies, and walked away by lies. So in that moment, looking at Fate, realizing that I could use no lies, I felt open. I felt naked. I felt unsure, like playing against a chess master, where every possible move opened me up to defeat, and there was no option of not moving at all. Here was a place that I could stand. I am a visionary, I said, speaking my fears. I can learn secrets from the past, present, or future. What government wouldn't want my abilities? What gangster wouldn't want them as well? In order to stay safe, nobody must know. Understood, said Fate, taking my arm, leading me forward again. She always led me forward. I would like to say that life got easier from here, but it didn't. Our Lord was born a carpenter. Who better to know how to build a church? I had a Tacitum to build, and I had been taught by Luke Mather. I had been taught carpentry by the very best.